The NHL season kicks off in less than a week. NHL 18 is already out, and if you've played it, it's pretty fun. But here at CCS, we're going to give you a preview of both conferences over the next few weeks. We're going to kick it off with the East and the Metropolitan. So I'm Ben Parsons.
I'm Dillon Clark.
And so Dillon, what do you think is going to happen in the Metropolitan division this year?
Well, the Metropolitan was obviously the more explosive out of the two in the East. Obviously the Pittsburgh Penguins, Stanley Cup champions of 2016, as well as 2017, coming out of the Metropolitan. I do think there are going to be some shakeups, though. Specifically, the one team I have underlined is the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah.
Now, the Hurricanes, as everybody knows, they've missed the playoffs for quite a few years now.
Yep.
The last time they were in the playoffs was 2009. They've made some new acquisitions, but I think more importantly is their young talent who was deemed unfit and unready, not ripe enough yet. I think it's their time. Young guys like Elias Lindholm and as well as.
Yeah, they added Justin Williams too.
Yes, and Justin Williams coming from Washington, but especially Noah Hannafin on defense.
Their defense was young, the core they have is very good. I think this could be a year you see them step up, kind of like how you saw Columbus last year in the division step up and come out of nowhere.
Exactly.
I think where you also need to focus on is with the Capitals and Penguins, they both lost some talent last season, whether it was from losing Marc-Andre Fleury to the Las Vegas team. There's now a team in Las Vegas, so if you didn't know that, check that out. Or for the Caps, they lost Shattenkirk, they lost Schmidt, they lost Johansson, they lost Alzner. They lost a lot of players, and the Capitals were the 1 seed last year. They never show up in the playoffs. But I think the Caps are going to take a little bit of a step down this season from where they have been playing before that. And another team you got to look out for is the Flyers. I think the Flyers are going to play better than they did last year. I think they could really jump on the Rangers positioning, because I don't think the Rangers are going to be as dominant as they were at times last season.
I think a specific weakness that the New York Rangers have is they are not particularly deep down the middle. They have guys like Rick Nash, but Rick Nash plays the wing, and they have obviously one of the greatest goaltenders in the NHL right now in Henrik Lundqvist, but there is no specific talent down the middle like we have in some of the other teams, like the Philadelphia Flyers. They have Claude Giroux.
Yeah.
And now this isn't to say that the center position is going to make or break a hockey team, but I think it is a distinct weakness that the New York Rangers have, and it needs to be addressed. And if it's not, maybe. I don't want to say that the Rangers could miss the playoffs, but I think they could see a significant downturn in where they are in the standings.
Yeah, the Rangers are a team that somehow every year, they don't have a star player. They have a star goalie. Their goalie is phenomenal. Right. But they don't have a star player on the offensive side of the ball, or of the ice, I mean. And so when you watch the Rangers play, they just seem to somehow make it work. A lot like the old Canadiens team. They didn't have a star other than PK Subban and with Carey Price. So, I just see the Rangers not performing as well this year. And then you got teams like the Islanders and the Devils, and both of those teams seem to be rebuilding, although I will say about the Islanders, they are pretty decent. They're a pretty good team. They have Tavares. Granted, that might be about it for some people, and they have a new coach, but this is a big year for the Islanders because they really have to figure out what they're going to do with Tavares at the end of the season.
It is, and I think if the Islanders fail to really come out of the season with any sort of direction, or should I say begin the season without any sort of direction, I think they're going to find themselves in a similar position as they were last year, missing the playoffs. And so far, John Tavares hasn't had, I don't think he's had the career that he maybe anticipated in New York. The management has not set him up to have the most successful career possible. And honestly, John Tavares is one of the more outstanding players in the National Hockey League. So I don't think this will be a big year for the New York Islanders, but I think it would be very important to see some success, mainly for John Tavares.
Especially with a new coach. They have Phil Housley.
Phil Housley.
Phil Housley is now their coach, I think. And so that's going to be interesting to see. It's no longer Jack Capuano, and I loved his interview takes. They were always funny to me. But I think for the Islanders, like we said, it's really a make or break year in terms of whether they're going to go full rebuild or whether they're just going to have to re-strengthen their team.
I think right now the Islanders, they're kind of stuck in the middle. They don't know what they want to do, if they want to start the rebuild process or try to actually compete for Stanley Cups. Right now they're just kind of treading water.
Like the Flyers a couple of years ago. And now you can say almost the same thing for the Caps. Like a lot of teams would say the Caps had a 2-year window to win the Cup, and now you're looking at the Caps, their roster is not nearly the same.
Right, and it's not just some people saying that was the year for the Capitals. Their general manager said that this was the year for us to win the Stanley Cup, and obviously the Capitals falling short by 2 rounds, losing to the Pittsburgh Penguins yet again.
If it wasn't for the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Capitals probably would have done it, but for some reason the Pittsburgh and Washington's are always going to be in the same division, at least right now, and hopefully that changes, because in all honesty, every year you see 2 of the best teams in the East play each other in the second round, and then the next team kills the Atlantic in the next round. So I don't think that's as much fun to watch. But it's definitely going to be fun to watch all these players. Now, before we go, is there any like standout players that you think are going to happen?
Standout players for the Metro, you know, I really think, you know, I'm excited to see how Nico Hischier plays in New Jersey. Now, obviously, the Devils aren't going to make the playoffs, at least not in my opinion.
Yeah.
They have added some key pieces, specifically Marcus Johansson alongside Nico Hischier.
Yeah.
But you know, I think it's always fun to see how the new kids do when they finally make it to the NHL. And, you know, you saw last year Austin Matthews scores 4 goals in his first NHL
oh my
game.
gosh.
I will never forget that. So you know, obviously the bar has been set pretty high for Nico Hischier. Maybe not. We won't see 4 goals in his first NHL
Probably
game,
not.
but I'm extremely excited to see how he plays.
Yeah, another young gun that I like is Noah Hannafin. I love the way he plays. Watching him on the ice is just unbelievable. He has great poise out there. He has great determination. I think he's going to really take a step forward and help Carolina get back to being one of those middle of the pack teams in the division. And the one thing about this division is that all these teams are good. Like, all of them are somewhat good. The only team that you might say isn't that great is the Devils right now.
Right.
But even the Devils are formidable. It's just the fact that this division is insane. So you're going to see a lot of great games, a lot of close games. Right. That wraps things up for our part of this NHL preview. Now we're going to send it on over to Grace Edinger and Nick Veronesi.
Alrighty, thank you, Ben and Dillon. So continuing our NHL preview for the week, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Atlantic Division. So Nick, who do you think are going to be the biggest contenders this year?
It's funny because 2 years ago, there were no Canadian teams in the playoffs. Now it's looking like all 3, like last season, could be in the playoffs in the Atlantic Division. Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto. Each of them have had their different ways of succeeding. Montreal being the big market team that has had success forever. And they have Carey Price. They recently traded for Jonathan Drouin to go with Max Pacioretty and breakout Arturi Lehkonen. They might not be division winners, especially considering how awful they've been during the preseason, but they should at least be a wild card, if not higher. And then the Senators, they didn't pick up anyone. It's hard to pick up big name players when you're a small market team like the Senators. But they made the Eastern Conference Finals last year. Erik Karlsson should be back, maybe not opening day, but a little bit afterwards. He's dealing with foot surgery. And he carried that team in the playoffs last year, so there's no doubt he's going to continue that trend. And then, of course, the Maple Leafs. You've got Austin Matthews, 40 goals as a rookie, won the Calder Cup, and he's not the only rookie on that team that is good on that team. You got Nikita Zaitsev, William Nylander, Connor Brown, Zach Hyman, and then, of course, they have recent acquisition from last year, Frederik Andersen in goal. And he's been a huge topic for the Maple Leafs defense. So expect all 3 teams to be in the playoffs. Maybe they'll switch around. Maybe Toronto will end up winning the division this year, and maybe Montreal will be a wild card, but they definitely expect all of them to be in the playoffs.
And like you said, the Maple Leafs, they're a young team. We've got a couple young teams. We've got the Sabres and the Panthers, who are both young. The Sabres have a new coach, Phil Housley. And then, as you mentioned, the Maple Leafs. Who would you say is the strongest contender out of those 3?
I would go with Florida, just because a couple of years ago, they were one of the top teams in the conference. Last year, they fell apart because there were a lot of injuries. Jonathan Huberdeau was down for a while. Alexander Barkov was down for a while. They did go a little bit younger by not re-signing Jaromir Jagr. The problem is there's a lot more competition in the division than people realize. And the Panthers, they took such a huge step back that they really didn't pick up anyone big. Their biggest pickup was Radim Verbata, who is known to be a top scorer for bad teams like Vancouver and Arizona. So we'll see how that works, but I wouldn't expect them to be any higher than, say, 95 points in a wild card spot.
All right. As far as American teams go, who would you say is the biggest contender in the Atlantic this year?
I would pick 2 teams. The Bruins, they've at least been in the playoff picture for a long time. They just ended their drought last season after a couple April issues. There's also the Tampa Bay Lightning, who nearly made the Stanley Cup final 2 years in a row. And then last year, the injuries just piled up, especially Steven Stamkos, 20 points very early in the year, and he missed the rest of the season shortly afterwards. So there was a lot of other injuries to go with that. I would expect Andrei Vasilevsky to be a huge breakout and potentially carry what has been an electric offense to at least a wild card. And the Bruins, they have Brad Marchand, obviously. They also have David Pastrnak. Jakob Forsbacka-Karlsson is also expected to break out this year as a rookie. And the Bruins should also be at least in the playoff picture.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Nick. That concludes our NHL preview for the day, and we hope you all join us next week. We're going to discuss the Western Conference.